I think some of the things I see us struggling with as an organization, as a community, listen more, speak less. I think one of the things that really benefited from dropping into new environments is you aren't smart enough to talk. Talking is about figuring out what questions you should be asking and doing a lot of listening. All the conflict we have and the different points of view and what it's kind of done to some of our societal fabric. I wish people would listen more and feel less the obligation to let me tell you where I stand.
Hello and welcome to the Leaders in Tech podcast. I am your host, David Mancilla. We dedicate this time and space to shine the light on leaders in technology that are really bringing the world to a better place by the achievements they're doing with their teams, their organizations, and the companies they're working at. Today, we have a wonderful example of that. Tom, welcome to the show.
David, thank you very much.
Tom, for the audience, can you tell me your full name? Where do you live? And where are you working at right now?
Sure. My name is Tom Andriola. I currently live in Orange County, California. So that's the area sandwiched between Los Angeles and San Diego. And my role is as the Vice Chancellor and Chief Digital Officer at UC Irvine, which is one of the campuses of the University of California.
That is wonderful. Can you explain a little bit more about your role? It's the first time I hear Vice Chancellor, for example.
Sure. So Vice Chancellor is a title that's very common in educational settings. And that's why I use also the Chief Digital Officer. People a little bit more familiar across industry with that particular title. But basically, I'm responsible for all technology at the university, which covers education, research, as well as healthcare. We're a very large healthcare organization, and my role is to bring more strategic thinking around how we use technology going forward, how we think about the data that is spawned by technology and using data to create value propositions and better outcomes. And then because technology and innovation go hand in hand today, I get involved in a lot of both internal innovation and in our innovation in partnerships with industry.
That is amazing, Tom. You must be a busy professional, but at the same time, a very happy and exciting person to be working in this incredible field.
Well, it is. I mean, I think one of the things that works for me in roles is a diversity of topics, right? And the ability to juggle several things, but also see the cross-pollination and the commonalities of things, right? Because I think when you're in the technology field today, there's plenty of tools, but you have to think in terms of what are platforms that you can build, right? And platforms come from commonalities that multiple use cases in your enterprise can take advantage of by building it once and letting people plug in. And with the diversity of the type of topics that I get pulled into, I get that vantage point of seeing similarities and analogs between what seem to be different topics, but I can kind of bring a different type of lens to them.
That is beautiful. You said that you're also responsible for the technology around the healthcare department, right? So you guys must have a very proficient healthcare section of the university where you build.
Yes. Yeah. And you see this with roughly about 100 universities in the United States, right? We used to refer to them as academic medical centers, which means you had a school of medicine or a school of nursing where you're training medical professionals, and then you had the hospital that was nearby where they did their practicums and they did their residencies before they, finished and went and started their true professional careers. Well, those single hospitals have grown now to be what we call health systems, right? So they're a multi-facility type entity, driven by balancing a lot of market forces. That is both competitive forces as well as what insurance companies are reimbursing for versus what it costs to deliver care. So if you look at our health enterprise, which is roughly 50% of our overall revenues here at UC Irvine, it consists of, primary care clinics that patients can visit, ambulatory centers where they can get different types of services and outpatient procedures, as well as a traditional hospital where you could go and have an inpatient stay or go to an emergency room. So it's a very large and complex enterprise. And of course, a lot of technology in healthcare today. So a lot of innovation going on. And so that's, roughly 50% of what UC Irvine is and does in terms of generating revenues coming into the institution.
So your role is super important, Tom, because not only you have to attend for the technology of the entire facility, but also you have a hospital and clinics that are serving people that are ill, you are responsible for the technology that they are using there. To give you an idea, I did interview about a year ago a senior VP of IT for a large Baptist hospital in Florida, but it was one large hospital. You have that, and on top of that, everything else.
Yeah, so it's exactly. So our health system now has grown to have 5, soon to be 6 hospitals in probably 40 to 50 different locations around the region, right? And again, that might be just, a 2,000 square foot facility that has a set of exam rooms and, doctors are there seeing patients in a primary care setting, just in terms of your annual visit. But, that's a lot of different, kind of things to make work. And also the ability for a patient to start and then the doctor say, well, hey, we're gonna get an MRI on that knee. And so then they have to have the information, follow the patient over to the facility where the MRI machine exists. Yeah. So it's a pretty vibrant environment, but the educational environment is equally challenging because you have researchers who are pushing the boundaries of whatever their field of study is, using the most advanced technologies. And you can imagine AI is huge in the research realm today. And then we have these things called students, right? 37,000 of them here at our university. And they're digital natives, most of them, in terms of they've grown up not knowing a world without Google or the internet. And have a very, very different expectation of how their university experience should go on. David, I like to say that, one of the, I call it the privileges of my role is seeing such vast spectrums of humanity in what I see every day. Healthcare, which I've spent a large number of years in my career in healthcare, can present to you some of the most challenging and difficult points in our lives. If you think about why people, are in facilities, the diagnosis that they're sometimes presented with, right? So you see some of the most difficult moments in human life. And then, an 18-year-old leaving their home for the first time, coming to our college campus represents, just the epitome of hope and potential. And there are some days where I get to see both ends of the spectrum within one working day. And I consider that a real privilege to have such diverse perspectives on humanity in one role.
That's beautiful. I was going to ask actually, Tom, how does one become vice chancellor of UCI? So let's look back in your career, because leaders like you are built with a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of stewardship. Did you go to university for computer science to begin with? Like, did you go to school at all? Like, how do you get into this role?
Yeah, so it's, as with most of us, right? It's a journey. Never could we have anticipated what the journey would have been, right? I think we have a starting point, and then lots of opportunities and people influence and move us in directions we never would have considered. So I was a reluctant engineer in my undergraduate experience. And I say that because engineering was more important to my father than I think it was to me. I think he saw the limitations and the opportunities that didn't get presented to him, and he didn't want his oldest son to have that same experience. And so, he had an insight of, having an engineering degree and having that background is going to always have lots of opportunities. So that's kind of where I started. Because I wasn't very mechanical or electrical, I ended up in kind of a systems engineering type, which stressed a lot of mathematics, statistics, and computer science. And so that's where I got my, let's say my introduction to technology, from the standpoint of then technology was, the personal computer. But because of things like statistics, I also have a really good background for when we're talking about things like data science and machine learning today, that has become all the rage, right, in this new digital era. I had backgrounds in that going all the way back to my undergraduate years that have served me well, because those foundations are there, at least from educational level, that help me understand what's possible today.
Your story reminds me of Well, number one, I'm a man of faith and I read my Bible every day. And the Bible says that if you honor your father and your mother, you will prosper and you will have a long life. That's a promise. And you did that. You honored your parents by becoming an engineer, and that changed your life, even though you were not inclined to the type of engineering they wanted you to have. And it reminds me of another story. I don't know if you know this guy called Peter Diamandis, but he's well known because he invented the X Prize, and because of him, the private space industry was launched in North America. So SpaceX and all those private space companies come from his idea.
Right.
But if you look at his biography, his parents wanted him to become a medical doctor. And he said, okay, I will do that just because I want to honor you. So he became a doctor and he never used his skills anymore because he wanted to be an astronaut. He was in love with space. But by becoming that, he honored his parents, and then he was able to get into his passion. And little did he know that he was going to use his medical skills for what he wanted to do outside of Earth's orbit. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. It is amazing. And I think there's a lesson that we talk about with the young people at our campus, right? Is that the world is evolving at such an amazing pace, and that your education is a foundation, but that is really just what it is, right? You have to continue to be curious, to be willing to learn. If it's what you want, use the opportunity to reinvent yourself. I don't know if you know this story, since we're talking about medical doctors, but one of the things they tell medical students is 50% of what you'll learn in medical school will be wrong and outdated by the time you're into medical practice. And you have to really think about that. But the reason they say that is not to scare people as much as to say, your training is just the start of your journey of being a good medical professional. Mm-hmm. Because our understanding of biology is going to change, our understanding of treatments, understanding of integrated nature of the human body and how it works together, and these connections between things that now become really, really interesting topics of research discovery and how we bring them in. They want the first year medical student to understand that it's just not about getting through these 4 years and doing your residency. It's a commitment to lifelong learning and coming up to speed with the latest discoveries that will drive how you'll treat your patients. And to me, when I first heard that, I was a little shocked. But the more I talked to medical professionals across my career in terms of how it's made them think about every day when they come and they sit down with their patients and how they prepare, it is this continuous learning cycle, which I think is true for all of us now.
Actually, even computer science is even worse than that, right? Like, I remember when I went through computer science, so I have 2 computer science degree. When I went the first time and I graduated, I quickly realized that all of the stuff that they taught me was just the foundation for me to learn more. Like, my first professional language where I started writing code was not taught by anything in university. I just had to go learn it myself because that's what my job required. And it just kept evolving, right? Once I thought that, I was trained on mainframe computers. And when I started working professionally, I was thrown into PCs connected to a server, for example, right?
Yeah, so, and I think us in the technology field, right? We understand that the ball is constantly moving on us, right? And we have to reskill. And I think one of the more interesting things is the reskilling we become very kind of comfortable and fluid with. But there's also been these paradigm shifts, right? You mentioned one of them, right? The mainframe to the server-based technology, right? To the internet technology, to the cloud, to mobile computing, and right now we're really being forced to rethink again. And I've been going through this ever since the introduction of ChatGPT, is really understanding this GPT approach to things and how it's going to transform, because it's going to have as significant an impact as the internet did when that was introduced to the mainstream of society. So we have to also change our thinking too, right? In addition to learning skills. And I think in the technology field, that's been one of the harder things to kind of really get through to people as I've been going through my leadership roles in technology.
Beautiful. Tom, what was your first job right after college?
So you didn't ask how long I was in college, right? So I was a reluctant engineer, and it wasn't a traditional experience. For reasons I won't go into, it ended up taking me 6 years to get my undergraduate. But I was fortunate to find a program that my university offered, known as cooperative education, and it's something that many universities do. But it gave me an opportunity to go off and work for a full semester and earn enough money to come back to school. And that's kind of how I got through school and the ability to pay for school. And so I worked for the Department of Defense, actually as a computer analyst, working with mainframes, much like you were mentioning. And so I got to apply what I was learning in the classroom in a real world setting before I had my degree. And I tell people that probably was one of the most important things for me, because I was one of those students who used to sit in the back of the class and saying, what am I ever going to use this for? Well, I got an insight into that before I graduated. And it made me then want to come back and be a better student, which in the second half of my college career I was. But then also when I left into my first professional position, I kind of already knew a lot about what the work world was like. And so my first formal position after graduation was with a company called Martin Marietta, which today is known as Lockheed Martin after acquisitions and mergers. And I was a systems analyst, computer analyst, and was involved in some kind of application level programming that we were doing for the Department of Transportation. So I was in Washington D.C. So a lot of the work I was involved with early in my career was in government.
How did you get into leadership within your context?
Yeah, I think, there were a couple of things that I think started to emerge as you start to learn yourself and learn about your strengths, right? Which I think you have a little bit through how you grow up, and you start to realize, things that you're stronger at than others. And in your career, you kind of learn them in different ways. For someone who came from an engineering and a computer science field, I was a little more comfortable speaking in front of people, getting up and, because I was involved in team sports, running teams. I always tell people I was a terrible developer. So what do? You run the project. Really, you don't have to write the code yourself. So I became a project manager pretty early, and found an ability through what I learned through team sports to be able to, how do you put a team together, make them a high functioning team to get the job done, rally people around a goal. And so that was my first level of leadership, project leadership. And then that evolved through different things to be able to then have organizational leadership roles, where then you're responsible for a group of people and a function and a set of goals in an organization. And so, I've had, just get great opportunity to be presented those opportunities, but also great mentors, but just also role models, right? I was one of those people. I was always looking at people who were more senior than me and saying, I'd love to be that person someday. And so then I'd watch them like a kid watches LeBron James play basketball and saying, how do I become as good as he is? And so I would do that in a professional setting. And I think that mentally at least prepared me for the things I was going to have to become good at if I ever wanted to have a role like that.
What a beautiful lesson, Tom. Just, it's common sense, but a lot of people don't do it. If you want to become like somebody else, why don't you study that person, how they make decision making? You don't even entering into a mentorship relationship is beautiful, but sometimes you all you gotta do is listen and watch and how they make decisions and start mimicking what they're doing. And before you know, you're beginning to get the skills, right? For me as a leader, I come from a family of leaders. Like all my my parents and all my siblings had their own business at the same time, and they became like bosses in their jobs. But when I was a junior programmer with my first professional job, nobody wanted to do for the software that we were releasing. So I was working for the School Board of Education. We had 2,000 teachers that we needed to support. None of the developers wanted to go be in front of them and teach them how to use the software we were releasing. And because I was a junior kid, I was the only one that couldn't say no. So they sent me over there, and then my boss started to realize that I was very good and fluent at, and interacting with people. And I didn't hate it. I actually liked it. So all of a sudden, my co-workers were asking me to go talk to the boss or talk to an internal client about different issues. So I started to become the liaison between the developers and the business. And that's when I realized that I was meant to be a leader in technology. And then, the director, the boss of my boss, saw something in me, and he quickly started to upgrade me to different roles of leadership. But it was just like a coincidence.
Yeah, no, so like sometimes we just stumble across our strengths, right? We don't that I think sometimes the hardest thing for us to realize is what are our true strengths, right? Sometimes they're pointed out to us by others who observe us from a distance, and they make us realize things that we never really thought about.
But how do you get into healthcare IT?
Um, so I was it's really interesting. Again, not planned at any stretch of the imagination. It started with during the internet. I was kind of one of those individuals who's kind of inside that tornado of activity, trying to get people to understand this new technology and this new medium that was going to transform our world. That's one of the reasons why I'm so excited about the period that we're in right now. It feels very similar.
Yeah.
And I was working with an organization, actually it was a medical device company, and they were really trying to change their strategic positioning, and they were really trying to lean in a way that the competitors weren't, into taking advantage of this new space called the internet, not just for like websites, but actually connecting doctors who were using their equipment to resources that they were curating through specialized, today what we call like portals. So they were really pushing the envelope, and I was part of that strategy team that they had brought in. We were external at the time, and through just a turn of events, being in the right place at the right time, their chief information officer left, and because I had relationships at the executive level, there were people like, you might be really good for a role like CIO. And that's kind of how I ended up becoming a chief information officer for the first time in my career, not by plan, not by traditional route, but by kind of parachuting through having good relationships. So having, those great communications and relationship building skills, I became a chief information officer. Well, as healthcare went from medical devices and selling things to actually selling software and really focusing on the data, which is really where decisions get made. The example I always use is that when the doctor sends you to get an MRI to look at your knee, the MRI is technology, but the doctor's diagnosis is based on an image. That's data, right? And I understood that because of my background. And I said, the value for the clinician, for the hospital administrator, is in the data that they're getting from the things that we're selling them. So we need to have these data strategies. And it was that kind of mindset and talking about it, and the leaders of the organization seeing how the industry was pivoting, that they said, you seem to understand this stuff better than other leaders we have here. We need you to play a more significant role. And so that kind of led to me then not being on the internal IT side, but being in the healthcare IT side, developing products to deliver to our customers. And so it was kind of just, a little bit of what my foundation gave me, a little bit of the industry was changing, and a little bit of how to communicate strategic change. And that just led to a whole new set of opportunities that I would never have anticipated I would have received.
That's beautiful. And so it was a very short period of time then between you being a junior computer analyst until you became a CIO.
It was, for a lot of people, they would say it happened really fast. My wife would tell you it also brought a lot of change, because it also, with opportunities, also came a change of locations in many cases. And so I joke that I have a wonderful partner who has been supportive our entire adult lives while we've raised 3 kids, but I've moved her 11 times. And so she's been incredibly flexible for the opportunities that I've had. But it did kind of happen fast, right? But I tell people, when people say like, well, how did you, I'm like, if you thought there was a plan, there was no plan. It was, trying to do the right thing, trying to demonstrate the value I was bringing, getting noticed, that people will say, and this is what I tell young people, it's like, you want to position yourself to be, when the organization is saying, we're struggling with this challenge, right? Or we see this new opportunity, who can we bring in to make that happen for us? You want to be one of the first person they think of, right? That's how you create opportunities for yourself, is to be the person when saying, this is going to be a tough one. You want to be on that short list of who comes to mind. So I always kind of thought that way, and it served me well. And so that's why it was never planned, because I never knew what the opportunity was. And when the opportunity was presented, I was always open to saying yes, even if that meant picking up my family and moving to a different country. As long as I had a willing partner who was willing to say, yeah, let's take this on. And we did, and that gave us an opportunity to live in several different parts of the US, to live in Europe, to live in Asia.
Wow.
And today, having a diverse set of experiences in which to pull on as I think about what am I trying to get done today.
So you did actually really move. I thought you were just moving within the States. You even went to Asia.
Yes,
Talk
yes.
about cultural
And again,
changing.
a great experience professionally, but also personally, that I was able to expose our whole family to, right? Is to give us a different perspective of how people navigate this life. Which I always say to people, I learned more about what it means to grow up American when I didn't live in America, because all the things I just took for granted, all of a sudden, when you're living in a different country, things work different. And that's what we say in our household. We don't talk about, better or worse or right or wrong. We talk about, look, they just do it differently there, because they do just fine. It's just different from how we might choose to do it in the United States.
And you exposed, you know, number one, congratulations and give thanks to your wife, to your lovely wife, to enable that, because she was the pillar of your success. And so that without her, you wouldn't have the success you have. And your kids, the exposure that they had to the entire world, it just brings gratitude and strength. I had to do that in a separate way. Like I was traveling all over the place. Like I was almost addicted to traveling for business, but I left my wife and I left my kids. So I was watching them grow horizontally until I had a life crisis when I was 39, and I said, what am I doing? I'm losing my wife, I'm losing my kids for nothing. My career cannot be more important to them. So I told her, I'm going to change my life and figure out a way how we can actually travel together. So we started traveling together. The internet got faster and I could travel remotely. I was a business owner already, so I could do a better choice making. Never stopped working, but we ended up being in Southeast Asia, in Europe. So we will go from January to April to May every year. We did that for 5 years. So one year I worked from Argentina the whole 4 months. Then another year through Thailand and Indonesia. Another year through Europe, Spain and Italy and all those places. And the kids were homeschooled during that time, but they were still in normal school. It's just that my wife will actually teach them the pensum while they were away from school. And you will think that they will do bad. They actually got better marks than the rest of their people that they were working with, they were studying with. So the first year was tough for the principal to let them go. The next year is like, please take them, And now if you look at my kids, now they are grown adults and their resilience is great. Their ability to make better choice making and to have more empathy towards different cultures, and also gratitude. Once you go to even Europe, right? Southeast Asia, you come back to US and you see how things are wrong here in Canada too. Your gratitude just goes through the roof, because you take for granted a lot of the things that we were offered in this beautiful part of the world that doesn't exist anywhere else.
Yeah. You use two words that are really big in my household: empathy and gratitude. Those are words that come up a lot. And I do attribute that to the exposure to different worldviews and lifestyles, right? Is that they have an appreciation. I'll use my oldest son as an example, right? So, here you are growing up, going to six different schools, right? So you're six different times in your formative years, you're the new kid, right? How hard it is to be the new kid. And so he's very empathetic towards coming into, a social setting, and people who feel really uncomfortable and anxious walking into a room of people they don't know. And we've just watched him develop this kind of ability to invite people in, even just simple things like invite people into conversations or saying, have you met David? He just has an ability to do that because he appreciates how hard it was for him to be the outsider. That empathy comes through in how he perceives others who might feel like an outsider and inviting them in so they don't feel so much like the outsider. And so it's those types of things, like when you take your kids through it, it's hard on them, and it's hard as a parent to watch them go through those struggles. But at the other end, you see resilience, the word you used, that kind of comes from those challenging times that you expose them to.
It's amazing. I think doing that with your family is one of the best things you can do for them. Knowing that there is alternatives too, right? Knowing that North America is not the whole world.
That is absolutely true, and I wish more Americans understood that. Yes, yeah. But again, I'm also speaking of gratitude. I feel very privileged to have had those opportunities. Right, I work hard, and working hard helped create those opportunities. But just because I worked hard doesn't mean that they would happen. Right, I feel very fortunate to even have the opportunities. Which why I always felt like saying yes was something we had to seriously consider, because I didn't want to look back and say, I wish we had done that. I wish we had gone there. And to this day, I still have things that I think are in front of me where I'm going to be presented with, am I really going to do that?
Mm-hmm. That's incredible. Another thing that you experience by doing that is getting used to change. And in your role as a top technology officer in a large corporation, what gives you the ability to run an exceptional team is your ability to change and embrace change. And in IT, where we are, and in healthcare, right? You just said 50% of what they learn becomes obsolete by the time they become doctors. This is crazy. So if they are not used to change, they're not going to thrive. Right?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that I probably spend the most time on right now. That doesn't show up in the job description, right? But it's helping people in their own way deal with the changes. It's like, I know how to deal with my change, but for all the direct reports that I have, right, because you become a leader of leaders at some point in your career if you become part of large organizations. How do people see people 2 or 3 levels down? How do you help people in the other functions of the organization deal with these changes? And how much do they feel like they're a part of it versus it's happening to them? Is something I feel like when I spend a lot of time in those conversations, trying to create the right environment for change to be discussed and then to happen. And then how to help leaders. We were actually just talking about this in call earlier today. How do we help other leaders in the organization find their leadership voice in change? Because they're the one who has the conversation with their staff about how, yes, things are going to need to be different going forward. Right? We have to prepare them to have that conversation and to find their own voice in that. And so I've always been a really big advocate of professional development programs for our people, simply because we have to prepare them to be leaders, because leadership happens at the point of the spear, not back at the end.
Yeah, Don, one of the things for me that differentiates great leaders from normal leaders is that when a leader develops other leaders, that's a true great leader. Because if you become a leader and you don't have the fruits of other leaderships underneath you, you haven't experienced the other half.
Yeah. And there's a mindset that comes along with this too. It's like, you can think of yourself as a great leader, but always feel like the people who you're leading, they'll always be junior to you. Versus a mindset that I don't know where it came from. It probably came from some influencer in my life that basically you should try to hire people who you think have more potential than you. Yeah. And I have several people within my professional networks that have gone on to much greater levels of success than me. Mm-hmm. And I look at them and I laugh because I'm like, I can't believe that person worked for me at one point in time. Right. And so I think that's a mindset that you have to adopt to, and not feel threatened by it. Because it's just going to happen. Some people, I think one of the biggest things that leaders don't look hard enough at is potential. It's like they look at someone and they only think about what that person could do if I promote them into this role versus what is their true potential. It's like this person is going to be a CEO someday. I just happen to catch them at this point of their career and I need them to do this role. But I also need them to recognize how much talent is inside them that is yet to be kind of, unearthed, and feel comfortable, not feel threatened by that, but feel like that's my job, right? That's part of what I'm supposed to be doing here. And now, again, having a longer career, I won't say how old I am because it bothers me sometimes, but, but now looking at some people and I'm like, I saw that potential when they worked with me 15, 20 years ago. I knew it was there. It was about helping them see that it was there. And once they did, then the sky was the limits for them. And I think, I encourage leaders to open their minds up that way and not just think about, well, this person's going to work for me in this capacity. No, think about what's their trajectory look like. And people do appreciate you when you invest into them in that way.
Of course. And that speaks also that you have your ego in check, right? When you feel threatened by somebody that you will hire because they might be better than you or become better than you, it's just fear. And ego comes out of fear, right? So the fear of losing maybe your position or looking less than somebody else will prevent you from giving a beautiful opportunity to somebody that that is going to achieve greater things. And it's your, God-given obligation and responsibility and privilege to bring them up to that level. Right?
You're absolutely right.
It's beautiful. Tom, it's been, more than 30 minutes already. I don't want to abuse your time. I know you're a busy executive. I'm going to ask you one last question before we finish the podcast, even though I could be talking to you for hours and hours. So I'll ask you one last question, Tom. If you had access to a billboard in front of the busiest highway on earth, what would you write on it?
Oh my God. Wow. That is a question I haven't thought of. If you ask me that today, tomorrow, Friday, next Monday, I absolutely know that I would give you a different answer every time, right? Because sometimes it's just what's in your mind today. I think some of the things I see us struggling with as an organization, as a community, listen more, speak less.
Mm.
I think one of the things that I've really benefited from dropping into new environments is you aren't smart enough to talk. The talking is about figuring out what questions you should be asking and doing a lot of listening. And I really enjoy that part of a role. I really do. That's another thing I've learned. And I think about all the conflict we have and the different points of view and what it's kind of done to some of our societal fabric. I wish people would listen more and feel less the obligation to let me tell you where I stand. I mean, that's important, but I think the listening needs to be first. Mm-hmm. And that's something I took away from Stephen Covey probably was the principal author that kind of put that into me through his wonderful book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But I think that's what I put on the billboard if had to make that decision today.
And if I were to do that earlier in my career, I would be so much further away than where I am right now. That's why I love my new job, because I get to talk and listen to people, right?
Absolutely. That's right. I hear Jimmy Fallon's going to retire in a few years. You could apply for the role. You could do it, literally do it full time every night on television. We could watch you.
Can you imagine? I don't think I'm ready for that. But you're completely right. We have 2 ears, 1 mouth. That alone should tell you we need to listen more than speaking, right?
That's right.
The Bible says that even fools, when they keep their mouth shut, they look like wise people. Right? And it also says that we will be judged for the vain words that come out of our mouth. So the power of the tongue is incredible. That's why we have to treat it very carefully. And when you educate yourself, when you listen to all the perspectives, especially as a leader in technology, then you have the ability to add value with these words that you're about to speak.
Yeah, and David, just to add to that, think about how much more complicated our world has become, right? We now have many different types of tongues we can use, right? There's the tongue of our voice. There's the tongue of our types on a keyboard, through a multitude of applications. We now will have a new tongue, which is generative AI tools that we will prompt to make statements that are not really our statements, but we will have prompted them to instigate them around a certain way or to create a certain beat. That is such a complicated world we've created, right? It used to be as simple as I just have to worry about what came out of my mouth. Now I have to worry about what comes out of my fingers and what comes out of a tool that might represent my point of view, or someone represents my point of view for me. It's become a very complicated thing, right? So wish us all luck.
And you know what I just realized, Tom, that your life story is all around data. And we're going to finish this podcast episode with data, because at the end of the day, Listening and speaking is consuming data, interpreting that data, and then provide feedback based on that data. People embrace AI and they have no idea how AI works. AI is nothing else than an aggregator of data that makes smart choices about the data it is receiving.
That's
so
right.
if the data is corrupted, the answers will be corrupted.
That's absolutely true, and a lot of part of the conversation, right? In terms of like how do we use these things in ways that are unbiased, ethical, equitable, responsible. It's going to be a huge part. So when we talk about like we're going to send our students out into the world knowing how to use these tools, they're going to be a huge part of their world, more than they have been for you and I. Mm-hmm. How do we give them the right value system around their use, right? If we don't do it here, they're going to get it out there. And so we're trying to say, what's our responsibility in the time we have them here to try to give them a value framework around these tools.
Beautiful. Tom, thank you so much for your incredible wisdom. Thank you for your career. Thank you for being such an amazing leader. If people like to follow you or ask you more questions, where can they find you online?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to say thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's been wonderful, our talk beforehand, and had a lot of fun here today. So thank you so much for the privilege to be on your podcast. The best place to find me is follow me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn. I'm always talking about the things that we're doing or the things that our amazing team and students are doing here at UC Irvine. I'll drop in a little bit of point of view stuff on there, but a lot of what I like to do is talk about the good things going on in the world, and I'm always keeping it positive because, again, positivity drives the world. So that's the best place to find me.
Wonderful, Tom. Thank you so much. God bless you, and have a beautiful rest of the week.
David, thank you so much. Same to you.
Cheers.
Thank you for tuning in to the Leaders in Tech podcast. Check in next week to keep learning how to use technology and leadership to change the game. See you next time.